Salam everyone. This is my third episode of Quran Contradictions Debunked. Did Allah forget to mention Ishmael as a son of Abraham? The contradiction. Can Muslims explain why, if the Quran is the perfect and infallible words of Allah, it forgot about Ishmael in verses 1949, 2927, 684, 2172, 1238, 3845, in which Abraham's other progeny, Isaac and Jacob, are named? So basically, he's saying in all these verses, Allah says Isaac and Jacob, but doesn't mention Ishmael. So the response to this is the Quran is a heavily detailed book and requires a lot of study to fully understand and grasp. What you think is a contradiction is actually a miracle of the Quran. So I'm going to also go through another article which explains and breaks this down. The Quran disqualifies the prophethood of Muhammad. Okay, let's have a look. Why didn't Allah include Ishmael in these verses, since Muslims claim that he is the prophet of Allah? The Quran states that God gave Abraham a son and a grandson to live with him and made them both prophets. These two are the only ones mentioned in God's gift to Abraham. Why is Ishmael named completely admitted as a rightful son of Abraham in these Quranic verses? So basically, I'll summarize it. They're claiming that the Sunnis claim that Muhammad is from the lineage of Ishmael. And then they're saying here, well, the Quran doesn't say that in these verses that Ishmael is part of his lineage and part of the prophethood. And why does Allah keep leaving him out if he's supposed to be so special for the Sunnis? So then, therefore, how can Muhammad be a prophet? The first thing to mention is that the claim that Muhammad is from the lineage of Ishmael is not a Quranic claim. So even if it was proven that Ishmael isn't part of the lineage of Abraham and the prophethood, therefore Muhammad, since they're claiming Muhammad is from Ishmael, Muhammad can't be a prophet. It would not actually be a contradiction within the Quran. It would be a contradiction between the external Sunni sources. So even now, I've already refuted this whole article and this whole claim. And I also want to show that Allah does actually say that Ishmael is a son of Abraham and is a prophet, which refutes this article again. And I need to explain is why is it that repeatedly over and over again, Allah doesn't mention Ishmael in these verses and only mentions Isaac and Jacob. So let's take a look. I'm going to show in every single video the 3 reasons why people say Quran has contradictions and why they deny the truth. Allah exposing the deniers. So the first reason is people use a falsehood to say the Quran is wrong. So they'll say the Quran says this, but we know from science this, when the Quran is actually right, but their so-called science is wrong. The second point is they don't have knowledge of the subject and say the Quran is wrong. Or they don't have the incorrect interpretation of the verse and say the Quran is wrong. So as you can see from the verses, those who disbelieve dispute using falsehood to invalidate thereby the truth. So they use falsehood to invalidate the truth, which is the first reason. Rather, they have denied that which not they encompass in knowledge and whose interpretation has not yet come to them. That's the second and third reason. So the argument here is that they're saying Allah forgot to mention Ishmael in all those verses, which I'll show you. It may seem like Allah forgets them, but this is actually a second issue, is that they don't have the knowledge of the subject and they say the Quran is wrong. So the first verse we're going to look at is 29:27. And we granted to him Isaac and Jacob, and we placed in his offspring the prophethood and the book, and we gave him his reward in the world, and indeed he in the hereafter surely among the righteous. So the first question is, so it says we granted to him Isaac and Jacob, and we placed in his offspring the prophethood. You can see here the verse doesn't mention Ishmael, and we granted to him Isaac and Jacob, but Ishmael is not mentioned. So this is a snippet from the Christian article. So it says, it is vital to note that after confirming the prophethood will be established with Abraham, Surah 29:27 goes on to state a profound truth. It states that the prophethood will therefore continue through the lineage of Isaac and Jacob. Therefore, the prophethood will be established uniquely to the seeds of Isaac and Jacob. In other words, the prophethood would be entrusted to Isaac, Jacob, and their descendants. This is why Allah declared that the prophethood will remain in the lineage of Isaac and Jacob. This means that anyone claiming to be a prophet of the one true God must be born in the prophetic race. They must be born in the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the Christian is claiming here that this verse says that the lineage of prophethood only comes from Isaac and Jacob. But is that what the verse actually says? Let's have a look. It says, and we granted to him Isaac and Jacob, and we placed in his offspring the prophethood. So you can see here the singular here is referring to Abraham. So his offspring is Abraham. So we granted to him Isaac and Jacob and placed in Abraham's offspring the prophethood. So I only see here prophethood being placed in the offspring of Abraham. Where does the verse say that it's only Isaac and Jacob? Like the Christian is claiming here, it states that prophethood will therefore continue through the lineage of Isaac and Jacob. Where does it say it? So it says, and we granted to him, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we placed in Abraham's offspring the prophethood. So the prophethood comes from the offspring of Abraham. And Ishmael is an offspring of Abraham, so he would be included here. Where the Christian gets confused is why is it that Allah doesn't mention Ishmael here? Why does he say, and we granted to him Isaac and Jacob, but he leaves out Ishmael? This is why the Christian is coming to this conclusion. Even though the verse itself doesn't actually limit it to Isaac and Jacob, this is just his misunderstanding of the verse. So this statement here can be refuted, where the lineage has to come from Isaac and Jacob. It's just a question mark on why Ishmael is not mentioned. And we granted to him Isaac and Jacob. Okay, it's strange Ishmael is not here. But it says, and we placed in Abraham's offspring the prophethood. So if Ishmael is the offspring of Abraham, he would then have the prophethood. It's just really strange Ishmael is not mentioned here. But the answer as to why Allah doesn't mention Ishmael here is explained later in the video. Ishmael is a son of Abraham. The previous verse 29:27 says Allah placed in the offspring of Abraham the prophethood. The Quran actually mentions Ishmael as a son of Abraham. 14:39 All praise is for Allah, who has granted me with Ishmael and Isaac in my old age. My Lord is indeed the hearer of the prayers. So Abraham says Ishmael is his son, proving Ishmael is the offspring of Abraham and therefore would get the prophethood. 37, 100 to 113 also implies the same thing. So Allah does make it clear that Ishmael is a son of Abraham. 29:27 And we granted to him Isaac and Jacob, and we placed in his offspring the prophethood. If Allah placed prophethood in the offspring of Abraham and Ishmael is his son, then he is also a prophet. Ishmael is a prophet. Additionally, Allah calls Ishmael a prophet in 1954 and mentioned in the book Ishmael, he was true to his promise and he was a messenger and a prophet. So the previous verse 29:27 is true. Ishmael, also from the offspring of Abraham, was given prophethood. But the question is, why doesn't Allah mention him in 29:27? Let's read it again. And we granted to him Isaac and Yaqub, and we placed in his offsprings the prophethood. So why does Allah leave Ishmael out? And we granted to him Isaac and Jacob. Shouldn't it say and Ishmael? If he's his son, is also a prophet. Okay, so Allah leaves him out here. Let's go next verse. The verse 1949. So when he left them and what they worshipped besides Allah, we granted, bestowed, blessed Abraham with Isaac and Yaqub, and each we made a prophet. You can see here Isaac and Jacob. Where is Ishmael? Remember, he's a son of Abraham, and he's also a prophet. So why doesn't Allah mention him here? Next verse 684. And we bestowed to him Isaac and Jacob. All we guided, and Noah, and we guided from before of his descendants of Dawood, Solomon, Ayub, Yusuf, Musa, and Harun, and thus reward the good doers. So Allah bestowed to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why doesn't he mention Ishmael, his son, and was also made a prophet? 21:72. And we bestowed to him Isaac and Yaqub, addition, and all we made the righteous. So Allah gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but he doesn't mention Ishmael, which we know is his son, and we know he's a prophet. What is going on here? And remember our slaves, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, possessors of strength and vision. Again, why doesn't he mention Ishmael? Why is Ishmael always left out? The Christian claim is that this is a mistake, that Allah forgot him, and asserts this is showing exclusivity to prophethood lineage to only Isaac and Jacob without any proof. However, the fact Ishmael is consistently left out throughout the Quran, could it be a sign that it is intentional? The answer. Ishmael is not mentioned besides Isaac and Jacob because of a promise Allah made in another verse of the Quran. In 1949, Allah says, "So when He left them and what they worship besides Allah, we bestowed him Isaac and Jacob, and each we made a prophet. And we bestowed to them of our mercy, and we made for them a high honorable mention." Allah promises Isaac and Jacob a high honorable mention. If Allah had mentioned Ishmael next to Isaac and Jacob in all those other verses, then he would have contradicted himself in this verse. Because if he's going to give Isaac and Jacob a higher ranking, a higher mention, but then mention Ishmael next to them in all those other verses, it would be contradicting this statement. The contradiction. Can Muslims explain why, if the Quran is the perfect and infallible words of Allah, it forgot about Ishmael in verses 1949, 2927, 684, 2172, 1238, 3845, in which Abraham's other progeny, Isaac and Jacob, are named? Had Allah mentioned Ishmael alongside Isaac and Jacob in all these verses, would he have kept his promise of giving Isaac and Jacob a high honorable mention, as he says in 1950? The purpose of all these consistent verses is to give both Isaac and Jacob an honorable mention, something he did not promise Ishmael. Now, this is a text from the other article that I showed you at the start of the video. It says, "Once again, we can observe that Ishmael is not mentioned in the above Quranic verses, whereas recognition is given to both Isaac and Jacob." I mean, it literally says it here. They're like, why is recognition given to Isaac and Jacob but not Ishmael? Well, because Allah promised Isaac and Jacob a high honorable mention. Why did not Allah include Ishmael in these verses, since Muslims claim he is also a prophet of Allah? I've shown he is, according to the verses. The Quran states that God gave Abraham a son and a grandson to live with him and made them both prophets. These two are the only ones mentioned as God's gift to Abraham. Why is Ishmael's name completely omitted as a rightful son of Abraham in these Quranic verses? Again, because Isaac and Jacob were promised a high honorable mention, and having Ishmael next to them would completely contradict that. As we have noted, whenever the Quran mentions about the founding of prophethood, at the same instant, it consistently states it will come through Isaac and Jacob. Thus, they are the roots, the ancestry from which his chosen race of prophets will descend. Hence, as for Allah and the Quran are concerned, the only true prophets are those who are the descendants of Isaac and Jacob. So it's a bit of a misunderstanding here. He thinks because Allah is only mentioning Isaac and Jacob in these verses, we can assume that the only true prophet and the only true prophethood comes from them. No, they are mentioned in these verses because Allah promised them a high honorable mention. And Ishmael is still a son of Abraham and is still a prophet, but he's mentioned on the side in other verses, but not to the same degree as Isaac and Jacob. So this is just a misunderstanding. We can actually see further proof in these verses. It says in 38:45, "And remember our servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, possessors of strength and insight. Indeed, we chose for them the honor of proclaiming the hereafter, and indeed they for us from the chosen the best." See how Isaac and Jacob are men of strength and insight? They have honor, proclaiming the hereafter, and they are chosen as the best. Why isn't Ishmael mentioned here? And remember our servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Can you see how Allah is giving them a high mention, a high honorable mention? But Ishmael is not included. So Allah has given them a high honorable mention in the Quran, as he kept his promise in 1950. So where is Ishmael? Well, Ishmael is actually mentioned in the next few verses. Let's have a look. It says, the verses I showed you, 38:45 to 47, "And remember our servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, possessors of strength and insight. Indeed, we chose for them the honor of proclaiming the hereafter, and indeed they for us from the chosen the best." The next verse says, "Oh, and by the way, guys, remember Ishmael. Ah, there he is. Elisha, Zukfulu are among the best." Ishmael is the only mentioned after the verses about Isaac and Jacob, alongside the other prophets, and not given the high honorable mention. Interesting. So you can see he's separated from their high honorable mention and put alongside like every other prophet. Now, if we go back and look at the verses a second time with the correct understanding, it becomes clear. "And we granted Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we placed in his offspring the prophethood." Can you see the honorable mention Allah is giving them? "So when he left them and what they worship besides Allah, we blessed Abraham with Isaac and Jacob, and each we made a prophet. And bestowed to him Isaac and Jacob, and all we guided. And we bestowed on him Isaac and Jacob, addition, and all we made the righteous. And remember our slaves Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, possessors of strength and vision. So, in summary, Allah did not forget Ishmael as a son of Abraham, as I proved to you. The Quran knows he's a son. Allah did not forget Ishmael as a prophet, as I showed you the clear verse where Allah calls him a prophet. And Allah did not forget to mention Ishmael in all those verses with Isaac and Jacob. Allah intentionally left Ishmael out of these verses as their purpose was to give both Isaac and Jacob an honorable high mention. You can see, Allah does not limit the prophetic lineage of Abraham to only Isaac and Jacob. This is a false claim from the misunderstanding of the above verses. They did not know why Ishmael was not mentioned. And now, if they watch this video, inshallah they do, and they concede. So actually, the reason I even started to research this topic was that a Christian actually said to me about this error. He said, why is Ishmael? Why did Allah forget Ishmael? And then when I studied it and I found the answer, I showed it to him and he conceded and he agreed it made sense. So thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe. See you in the next video.